It was a bombshell so many didn't see coming.
Words cannot describe how shell-shocked the Clinton campaign is right now.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for the biggest and most consequential electoral upsets from around the world that hardly anyone saw coming.
The man who won the war has lost the election.
Number 10. Narendra Modi loses outright majority. 2024 Indian general election. Between April and June 2024, nearly 650 million Indians voted to elect members of the Lok Sabha, the lower house of parliament.
India's blockbuster Prime Minister is gearing up for another election. Narendra Modi is widely popular, both in India and overseas.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, seeking a third term, entered the election holding an absolute majority with his Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, and was widely expected to win decisively. However, the BJP's occasionally divisive message alienated many voters. This discontent was leveraged by the newly formed opposition coalition, the Indian National Development Inclusive Alliance, or India.
This alliance was formed just a year ago, where more than a dozen regional parties teamed up to take on Narendra Modi and the BJP.
Consequently, the BJP suffered an unexpected defeat, losing its regular majority in the Lok Sabha. Although the India bloc exceeded expectations, Modi remained prime minister because his own coalition, the National Democratic Alliance, secured enough seats for a majority.
एनडीए की लगातार तीसरी बार सरकार बननी तय है.
Nevertheless, his influence in parliament is now considerably weakened. Number 9. Lula da Silva defeats incumbent Jair Bolsonaro, 2022 Brazilian general election. In the 2022 Brazilian election for president, voters faced a stark ideological choice.
These past few weeks on the road have been noisy and relentless. Both Lula and Bolsonaro are well aware this has become a tight race.
On one side, there was the far-right incumbent, Jair Bolsonaro, whose presidency was marred by mishandling the COVID-19 pandemic, widespread deforestation of the Amazon, and attacks on minorities. On the other side stood Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, a leftist former president who highlighted the achievements of his previous tenure and promised economic reforms.
Two political foes now going head-to-head to lead Latin America's biggest nation. There's concern this race could also get violent.
Although pre-election polls showed Lula leading, Bolsonaro's strongman image and significant support base suggested it was going to be a much tighter race. After 2 rounds of voting, Lula narrowly defeated Bolsonaro, marking a stunning political comeback for the former president who had once been convicted of corruption and sentenced to prison.
What a comeback for Brazil's president-elect, a man who left power just 12 years ago with a sky-high approval rating, but who then subsequently fell from grace over corruption scandals. Here he is again, Lula 2.0.
Number 8. Bassirou Diomaye Faye wins. 2024 Senegalese presidential election. The 2024 presidential election in Senegal was initially scheduled for February 25th. However, on February 3rd, President Macky Sall, who was term limited, decided to postpone it indefinitely.
The announcement surprised many voters who hoped to have a say on their country's future.
He has betrayed the spirit of dialogue. He has betrayed the Senegalese people.
Sall's government had already imprisoned prominent opposition politicians, like Ousmane Sonko and Bassirou Diomaye Faye, raising concerns about the future of Senegal's democracy. The postponement intensified ongoing protests sparked by Sonko's imprisonment, and it was ultimately overturned.
The bill that pushed back the February 25th poll had sparked protests across the country, claiming the lives of 3 people.
Just days before the rescheduled election on March 24th, Sonko and Faye were released from prison and allowed to campaign. Faye ran for the presidency in place of Sonko, who was disqualified due to his conviction. Despite the brief campaign period, Faye surprisingly emerged victorious, largely supported by young voters, and became Senegal's youngest president at the age of 44.
Now, Mr. Clean, as he's nicknamed, has promised to get to work on some sweeping reforms.
Number 7. Truman defeats Dewey. 1948 United States presidential election. Every election cycle, voters, pundits, and politicians alike wonder just how accurate the polls are. Polling errors have always existed, but none were as shocking as those in the 1948 election.
The pundits, the pollsters, they all expected a Dewey victory.
Truman, who became president following the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt, was running for his first full term. Due to a struggling economy and labor strikes, Truman had grown deeply unpopular. And it didn't help that divisions in the Democratic Party had resulted in a three-way split.
Delegates who walked out of the Democratic convention formed their own party.
The Southern revolt against President Truman reaches its climax at Birmingham under the states' rights banner.
The so-called Dixiecrats nominated the South Carolina Governor Strom Thurmond as their presidential candidate.
All signs pointed to a loss for Truman, with polls consistently showing him several points behind Republican candidate Thomas Dewey. Some newspapers even prematurely published the headline, "Dewey defeats Truman." However, in a stunning upset, Truman won the election with 303 electoral votes to Dewey's 189.
Governor Thomas E. Dewey today conceded the presidential election to President Truman.
Number 6. Leftwing Coalition triumphs over the far right. 2024 French legislative election. Following the 2024 European Parliament elections, which heavily favored the far-right National Rally, French President Emmanuel Macron dissolved the National Assembly and called for snap elections.
The snap election was called by President Emmanuel Macron after his party's poor showing in recent European elections. The stakes are high for Macron as his centrist coalition could lose seats to the far-right National Rally Party.
Macron aimed to catch his opponents by surprise, hoping their lack of preparation would lead to a loss in the legislative election. However, after the first round of voting, his plan seemed to backfire, as the National Rally secured nearly a third of all votes.
All the polls before this election have predicted they at least would become the largest party in the French Parliament. They said they were poised to govern.
This initial setback triggered intense political maneuvering, resulting in over 200 left-wing and moderate candidates dropping out to avoid splitting the vote. Despite their early success, the National Rally was dealt a stunning blow in the second round, as the freshly formed leftist alliance, New Popular Front, ultimately won more parliamentary seats.
In a shock result for all and a huge relief for many here, the far-left coalition has unexpectedly become the biggest party in the French Parliament, beating the far right.
Number 5. Donald Trump wins. 2016 United States presidential election. Going into the 2016 U.S. presidential election, Republican candidate Donald Trump was the underdog.
The man who so often hurled invective during the campaign.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime.
After all, he was up against Hillary Clinton, who had a wealth of political experience and stood to make history as the first female president. Furthermore, Trump's campaign was riddled with controversies. He made inflammatory comments about immigrants and his opponents, faced numerous accusations of sexual misconduct, and was caught on tape making lewd comments about women.
That was locker room talk. I'm not proud of it. I am a person who has great respect for people, for my family, for the people of this country, and certainly I'm not proud of it.
Despite all of this, and the fact that Clinton consistently led in pre-election polls, Trump clinched the win by way of the Electoral College, securing key swing states like Florida, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
This means that Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States, winning the most unreal, surreal election we have ever seen.
It was one of the most stunning political upsets ever, surprising even Trump himself. Number 4. Conservatives win absolute majority. 2015 United Kingdom general election. In the lead-up to the 2015 UK general election, polls didn't clearly indicate which of the two main parties would win a majority.
Let's start first off with the forecast that we have at the moment. Bear in mind, these are projected seats.
The general prediction was a close race between the Conservative and Labour parties, with many expecting a hung parliament. The Conservative campaign, led by then Prime Minister David Cameron, emphasized economic stability and strong leadership, contrasting this with predicted chaos under the Labour Party.
I've just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, and I will now form a majority Conservative government. we will govern as a party of one nation, one united kingdom.
This message resonated with voters, and the Conservatives achieved a surprising victory, winning a majority of 330 seats in Parliament. Contributing factors included the unexpected collapse of the Liberal Democrats and the rise of the Scottish National Party, which further fragmented the opposition.
This is, of course, an enormous moment for the SNP, and no one can deny that.
The people of Scotland are speaking, and it is time for their voice to be heard at Westminster.
This unexpected outcome led to the resignation of Labour leader Ed Miliband. Number 3. Too close to call. 2000 United States presidential election. 537 votes. That was all it took to decide the presidency in 2000.
And I got on the phone with Bill Daley, and he said, "What's up, Mike?" And I said, "Billy, we haven't lost. This thing's going to be an automatic recanvass." I said, "This thing's too close to call."
The election that year was between Vice President Al Gore and Texas Governor George W. Bush. With every other state accounted for, the results hinged on Florida, where the vote margin was razor thin. Initially, Bush had a slight lead, prompting automatic recounts.
This race is simply too close to call. And until the recount is concluded and the results in Florida become official, our campaign continues.
However, legal battles quickly ensued over ballot counting methods and deadlines, culminating in a Supreme Court decision that halted the recount while Bush was in the lead, effectively awarding him Florida's crucial electoral votes.
The court declared that the recounts violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause because there was no uniform standard for counting all ballots.
It was the first time in over a century that the candidate who lost the popular vote won the presidency. To this day, some people still dispute the results of this election. Number 2. Winston Churchill loses the prime minister seat. 1945 United Kingdom general election. By the end of World War II in Europe, Winston Churchill was one of the most celebrated figures in the world, widely admired for his wartime leadership.
Shortly after VE Day, Winston Churchill was forced to call a general election by his Labour coalition partners. It had been 10 years since the last election, and the country wanted its say.
In the UK, his approval rating stood at a remarkable 83%. With such popularity, Churchill and his Conservative Party felt confident of their chances in the 1945 general election. However, the electorate's focus had already shifted to post-war reconstruction.
After enduring the horrors of war, the Labour government was determined it was they who should win the peace, to create a new Britain.
The Labour Party promised sweeping social reforms, including nationalised healthcare and improved housing and employment conditions. These promises resonated with a public eager to move on from the war and led to a landslide victory for Labour. Although Labour leader Clement Attlee became Prime Minister, Churchill later returned to the position after the Conservatives won the 1951 election.
And in 1951, at the age of 76, he is once again appointed Prime Minister.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications.
Number 1. Hitler's Nazi ideology becomes popular. 1932 German presidential election. In the 1932 German presidential election, Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party made significant inroads, achieving a remarkable breakthrough.
Though he was to lose the election to President Hindenburg, Hitler had established himself as a credible alternative leader of Germany.
After years on the political fringes, the Nazi Party rose to become the second largest party by the 1930s, securing about 37% of the votes in this election. Although Hitler lost the presidency to independent incumbent Paul von Hindenburg, the result was shocking to many, as it brought the Nazis' radical ideology to the forefront of German politics.
The Nazi Party proposed little in the way of detailed policies, but it offered order, discipline, and the personality of Adolf Hitler.
This democratic endorsement lent a semblance of legitimacy to their extreme platform and positioned Hitler as a key figure in Germany. It also marked a crucial turning point in his eventual rise to power and the establishment of Nazi rule in the country.
Democracy had arrived in Germany at the end of World War I. Now the majority of Germans wanted to be rid of it. In his election speeches, Hitler made no secret of the fact that a vote for the Nazis was a vote for dictatorship.
Which of these election outcomes were you the most stunned by? Let us know in the comments below.
Victory that feels like a defeat for Brand Modi. The aura of invincibility that has come to surround him has been damaged.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.